Hey, it's Guido coming at you with a tank review of the Tier 8 French heavy tank, the AMX 65t, that you can see right here in my garage in all its glory. As usual, we'll go over a general overview. We'll talk about the tech tree, some considerations there. We'll do a comparison with some of its peers. We'll have my setup and some discussion about how I ran it, and then I've got some examples of gameplay at the end. So we will start with the general overview. You can see that it looks like a lot of the French tanks, like some kind of science fiction tank that was created by a kid who was doodling in class when he was bored, right there. Against some of its peers, one thing you will notice that it is very tall, but it is about the same size as the rest of the tanks. Obviously the OHO is massive, but that is an outlier, although it is not a whole lot smaller as far, or a whole lot shorter, I would say, than the OHO. Overall, it's not quite as massive. It's about as tall as a KV5 for comparison of something you may use quite a bit, or potentially even the KV4 right there. Just about, oops, that's not it, just about the same height as the KV4. And as you look at it, you can tell that there are a couple things to note right away. The big tumor on the top, so anytime you are attempting to, that's awesome, anytime you are attempting to poke over a ridge, that is the first thing the enemy is going to see and be able to punch into. Quite sloped armor, and it looks like something of the pike nose effect going on right there. That will be a challenge to use in the game. The tracks are massive, so as far as eating heat and things like that, they're fairly useful. Although you'll also notice that, like many French tanks, it's going to stick a lot of its front sprocket out when it's attempting to come around the corner right there. This particular tank is running with the upgraded turret. There is some talk about people using the first turret in this and potentially down to the 100mm, but I recommend you put the big gun on it because that's about the best you're going to get out of this tank. So that is the general overview. We will go ahead and jump into the tech tree. For the tech tree, you can see that I've got the French called up right here. It splits off now. This new mini line comes off of the M445. So if you've unlocked the M445, then you can start working on the AMX 65t, which is going to mean you have to go back to the AMX M445 and start grinding or use free experience if you have that. It goes to the AMX 65t, the M451, and then on to the M454. I'm currently on the M451. There are 5 crew members in the M445, and by the way, there are 5 crew members in each one of these new tanks. In the 5100, 5120, and the AMX 50B, there are 4 crew members. So your radio operator will have something to do. If he happens to still be around when you were grinding up the M445 and you just threw him into the barracks, then you can go ahead and use him because you didn't use him on the 5100. The FCM 50T, which is the premium heavy tank for the French, actually has 5 crew members, so it will train both 5100 and 65T crews no problem. So that'll actually be helpful if you have one of those around and you're using that for training crew. Not a lot else to talk about on the tech tree. Like I said, it splits off from one tank right there and pretty straightforward right up to the MX M445 as far as module upgrades and things like that. Not too difficult at all. Alright, so we will now do a comparison. You can see that I have set this up with the AMX 65t and a bunch of its peers. I am not showing any premium tanks on this. We'll just take a look at the tech tree tanks that it competes with. As usual, I have taken all the equipment off of these for the configuration. I've set it to 100% crew. I've taken off any paint jobs and all of the crew out of there as well. So what you are getting is the basic tank with fully upgraded modules and 100% crew. That's what these numbers are right here for comparison. So it'll all be basically the same tank as far as all that goes. We'll start with firepower. It's interesting. The idea with these tanks was that they were going to be the French armor tanks, whereas the other line with the 5100 and the 5120 were fairly thin-skinned tanks. This was supposed to be the armored group. Well, that's kind of interesting. The M445, the Tier 7, it has okay armor. I wouldn't call it any kind of really heavily armored tank, but it's okay. And you jump up to the 65T and you're thinking, all right, I'm in the French heavy armored tank, but that just really doesn't play out. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you look at the number that Wargaming uses for its firepower, it's near the bottom with 303, and these tanks are kind of all over the place. You got a Tiger II showing a firepower number of 440, which is quite high right there, and all the various numbers. Even the Carnarvon, which is 484. That surprised me, actually. This thing then is sitting down there, even with the big gun on it, in a fairly anemic 303 number. So why is that? Well, let's take a look at it. 400 on the average damage right there, which is relatively high, not best in class because you've got the 100.01 at 440, but it's definitely pretty decent, 10 more even than the IS-3. So that's okay. The alpha's good. As far as the big stick goes, that's pretty decent. Penetration is okay, right in the middle. It's not as bad as a T32, which is notoriously terrible at 198, but it's not really as high as, say, the Tiger 2 with that nice 225, but still, it's right up in there. No real issues with the penetration, actually, on this one. Rate of fire, though, is relatively low, so it does take quite a long reload, and you're not really getting a lot of bang for your buck. So I'm going to jump down here and just show you that the interesting thing about this is the DPM is absolutely horrendous, down at 1,814. So a slow reload with a big alpha gun probably reloads a little slower than it really should be to be actually very competitive. And the thing is, I talked about the armor earlier. Usually the trade-off with heavily armored tanks is typically a big stick with fairly low DPM because it takes a long time to reload. Well, that would be fine if this tank actually had armor. We'll get to that, but it doesn't really. The gun depression is -8 with a elevation of 13, which is decent. The elevation is a little bit painful. I ran into several problems at +13, getting up on ridges and attempting to look up a little bit. Very difficult. And 13, somewhere around 13 to 15 is where it is just really painful for elevation to be that low. It really takes away some of the places that you can fight from. Diving down here, aim time is okay at 259. A little bit higher than most, but not as bad as the IS-3 at 3.26. So decent there. Dispersion is okay at 3.5, middle of the pack. So the gun is fairly comfortable. It's not too bad to shoot the gun. The problem is you just don't get a lot of shots per minute, obviously, with the low rate of fire. And so misses end up being quite painful there. And I would say that the alpha is not so much more than the rest of the tanks that you say, all right, I got this real big stick and people are afraid of it. They kind of look at it as they do with the rest of the tier 8. So that ends up getting you kind of pounced on, and because your DPM is so anemic, you can run into quite a few problems as far as that goes. So survivability, this gets into the armor thing I've been talking about. The hit points are low, which is interesting to me, not as low as, say, the IS-3 at 1,500, but they are on the low side. So this is supposedly supposed to be the big armored brick kind of breakthrough tank, but low hit points. And then we get to the armor, and holy cow, the hull is at 100. Now it's highly angled, but it's a pike nose, which is tricky to use in World of Tanks, of limited use, really, the pike itself. It can create funny angles if you're doing some poking, side scraping, and things like that, but if people know what they're doing, side scraping just tends to flat plate the pike for them, and they punch right through. In any event, it's only 100 millimeters, which is kind of a bummer. So really the armor doesn't hold up. The turret is 250, which is actually pretty good, but I will tell you in game it just doesn't feel like that, and I think that's probably because the weak spots are so massive, like that big turret right there. Plus the hole is so inviting a target to shoot at. It just seems like, yeah, it's nice to have 250 and a fairly sloped turret, but it just, the way the game is played, it just doesn't turn out that it's that big of an advantage. If you're on a back slope, it can be quite good, though, because you'll notice when I showed it to you, it was very angled. So it can get into some auto bounce kind of situations right there. So as far as that goes, that's great, but you're not always fighting on a back slope with that nice angle right there. The mobility is surprisingly pretty good. It's got the highest specific power. It has a 40 knot or 40 kilometer an hour top speed, which is tied for best in class. And I think it'll only go to 40 even downhill. That's one thing it doesn't do. It has a speed governor, I believe, and will not go over 40. But it's fairly sprightly. It doesn't really seem like it when you're driving it, but then, you know what, drive it and go back into some of these other tanks. Like, for example, the KV-4 is a great example, and even the IS-3 or the Tiger 2, and you'll notice that it is a decently sprightly heavy tank overall. Concealment, who cares? It's a tier 8 heavy tank down there, and of course, view range is a little bit on the low side, and signal, nobody cares about signal. So you see, there's nothing really, if I was, and I try to do this, is hang my hat on what this thing does well. And I can usually come up with one thing for each tank that it does well. And I will be quite honest with you, it doesn't have anything that it does well. The total package is okay, all right? So it's a mediocre tank, I would say, at best, especially as you're looking at these comparisons. But there's nothing it does great. If I was cornered and someone said, all right, that's fine, Guido, you have to actually come up with one thing that you like about the 65T, and I would say, well, I guess I like the 400 damage over 390, you know, 10 more average damage. But that is about it for that. All right, that is the comparison. Let's move on to my setup. All right, for my setup, I have all of the top modules unlocked. Pretty much goes without saying. I did that with free experience, so I don't have any information on the grind on this tank. I will say, based on its mediocrity all the way kitted out, it's probably a fairly painful grind overall. Although the bottom gun is okay, I would say, taking a look at that with the 90mm, 240 with 212 pin, that's kind of on the low side, but all the stock guns are a bit painful. The 100 is okay, and this is something that you're going to find in all three of these French tanks, or at least not all three, the 8 and the 9. The tier 10 is fully kitted out like all tier 10s are. The 8 and the 9 both have a smaller gun with a better pen, which is kind of a tempting thing if you think about it. This one in this particular case has the 100 at 232 pin with the 120 at 218 pin, and then of course the gold slightly higher. A 300 alpha on the 100 and a 400 alpha on the 120. I would recommend that you unlock the 120 and use the 120. This thing really needs that little extra oomph to make it even relatively effective out there. So that's what I would say there. As far as the rest of my setup goes, I've got improved vents. I'm running a large caliber tank rammer, and I've got the vert stab. There's really nothing else that I would run other than those three pieces of equipment on this heavy. There's almost no reason to put anything other than those three things that I can even come up with right now. As far as my loadout for ammo, I've got 30 AP, 8 APCR, and 2 HE. 2 HE is more than enough. It's got a pretty good number of shells, so you really shouldn't have any trouble running out of ammunition with this tank. And I am running a small as far as repair kit and first aid, and a large, as I run with everything, a large fire extinguisher is what I'm running in this thing. So that is my loadout. My crew is gone, because I moved them up into the next tank, to the tier 9 tank. But they were a pretty decent crew that I had moved up from my M445, a crew that had been sitting in that for a while. And I want to say they had 2 to 3 skills in the standard skills in there, with 6 Sense, the firing on the move skill, smooth right, I guess it's called, the standard kind of heavy skills in there. So it was a decent skilled crew that I used. Alright, so let's move on to some examples of gameplay. Alright, for the first example, you can see that I've loaded into Cliff in a standard battle, and I've got a good setup. I'm in a 357. Spawned in the south, and this is actually the first battle I ever had in this tank. As I noted earlier, I am fully upgraded, and I have a pretty good crew in this. And I'd heard that this is a armored tank. It's the armored French tank, so I thought, well, this is actually a pretty good setup. There's not a whole lot here I'm super afraid of as far as a gun goes. You know, some of the tier 8s are obviously going to have a little trouble pinning me, especially if they press gold, but the rest of it I can have a reasonable expectation of fighting and bouncing. So I'm actually going to come up here up the 2 line with the intent of going up the ramp and then fighting the guys who are trying to cross. So I come out here and I just basically no respect the other team and head off this way, and of course the artillery starts bombing on me. The 304, and there is a whatever the next follow-on one is called, a Crusader, who I think is actually firing the small gun. So between the two, they're going to reload quite quickly and rain on me for a while. But I'm going to come up here, and remember we talked about the depression's pretty decent. -8 is good enough to use this spot right here and other spots like it in the game. So you can just basically go hold down here. I'll take a quick shot. And that one's a miss, but you'll notice that throughout the rest of this game I do have some pretty good luck with the gun. Fairly comfortable handling overall. Got artillery paying attention to me right here. Able to even hit that 131 while stunned, no problem right there. Got some guys pushing on the 1-2 line. I'm going to come up top here. We've got a Scorpion over there. So I'll wait to zoom in and fire that. You can see pretty decent gun. Fairly quickly zooming in on there. Decent accuracy. It's not laser accurate, but it's not bad at all. Let's see if I can get this T29 right here. He sneaks out of the way. We've got the Leo. There's the Scorpion again. 131 goes down. Looking for a shot on the Scorpion. I don't want to get too far out here. Shot right into there on the Sherman. Artillery's bombing on us. That is a crit no damage on the Scorp. I've got to back off. There you go. So there's the armor working for me. He actually hit the other side of my pike nose, which is why it had even more angle. Zoom in there, and I've got the artillery and the 1375 is sitting up on their cap. It looks like artillery's still bombing on me. Another artillery shot onto me. And I'll be honest, it was at this point I was highly irritated. We had pushed down the 1-2 line a little bit, and we had some guys trolling around in there. I was hoping that T-20 would be able to find the artillery and take him out, but I get hammered that time, actually. Looks like maybe a pen. I mean, 175 from a 304 plus kill day. Crew member, that's actually a pretty hard hit from a 304, so a little bit irritated. I'm going to head down here, switch away from gold. I'm not going to need it if I can find this artillery. You can see he's spotted there at about, what, B1, C1. But we're not going to be able to work there with those two fast-firing artillery. They're just basically going to keep shotgunning us like that. So we need to make those two go away. The Centurion, the Leo, there's two other tanks way around the corner right there. Artillery's firing in there, trying to take out the 304. Rudy goes down. We got guys pushing the caps. It's not looking great. I need to get rid of these artillery. This guy is just sitting here. Down he goes. I'll use this building as cover from any of their tanks going to shoot me in the side. Crusader SP is right there, and he's going to look to run away. And I get a shot on him. So you can see a decent accuracy on the gun, especially zoomed in. Pretty good. You notice it's difficult to maneuver at times, as most Tier 8 heavies are. 3001, you'll see this shot, just blap, takes him down. So pretty good example. I mean, you're seeing some bounces. It's getting some bounces, so the armor is holding up a bit for me. The accuracy of the gun is decent. It's not amazing, but it's pretty decent. Another shot into the side of a guy right there. You get that Scorpion. He's come down in here looking for us. I don't have to worry about Artie anymore, so that's nice. I'm just looking for a shot on this Scorpion if I can get rid of him somehow. He's kind of pushing in on that artillery. Not artillery, but TD, and I get him down. Probably not wise to stop, but I did get a bounce. Looks like he hit my turret, but the T-29 does not bounce. He has a better aimed shot onto my hole, and he's looked down, so he punches through me for 381, but a little wiggle right there, and you can see that the armor holds up a couple more times, just making the angle difficult, as difficult as possible. Bounce off the Centurion. I'm not in a great spot here. I sort of need some help. The RHM's kind of camping back at cap. I've got these two guys hold down, so they're going to be very difficult for me to deal with. If I make a mistake here, pretty soon I'm going to get hit by one of them. He's just waiting for me and hammers me. The good news is 1375 goes down. That's a big deal, because the scout's in big trouble. Especially if we get into a situation where he can outspot me and I can't see him. And that's exactly what I'm waiting for. I'm like, alright, we got two artillery. I sort of need them to dig this guy out so I can start dealing with the rest of the tanks. The AT-7's moving up behind me. We're going to go try to find this T-29 here momentarily. There he is. And I just pop him, driving forward and back. That big Alpha, now think about that. I would have needed a pretty good high roll with that smaller gun to take him out at 335. So, you know, the bigger Alpha guns, they're just better for finishing guys. The more points you have on the alpha, obviously, the better it is when you got a near dead and you're trying to take that guy down. So a great example in there for this tank as far as decent mobility. So I got to a pretty forward spot, was able to fight here, good depression, decent enough to use the spot like where I am right now. Enough mobility to flex out of here, go take down the artillery, turn back around. Pretty good accuracy on a couple shots that were more or less snapshots. Not huge snapshots, but not all the way zoomed in either. And then the armor was able to hold up here and there. So a pretty good example of how this tank fights. I'm not going to make you watch the rest of it because it takes us a while to track the Leo down, and I'm not the one who gets the kill. But 3,391 damage, 1,100 blocked, and 847 spotted or assisted. Let's move on to the second example. The next example is a city brawl, and we are here on Siegfried line. I've spawned into the south and I'm headed to my favorite spot. I got a 103 on the corner right here, and my intention is to go down this alleyway and get over by the castle. I make a mistake here because I thought he had probably fired at the 103, and I mistook that he had not fired, so I'm diving into this spot here. And unfortunately I've traded 477 hit points to get this spot, which is not all bad. We'll see what happens. Holy cow, their tier 9 version of me is headed up here. And he is getting punished a little bit. I go for a track on him right there. And things are looking a little grim. You can see that the reload is not very fast, so that is a bit of a problem. I've got to kind of protect myself here. I get up underneath his track area right there and get through a weak spot. So he's been hit by the T10. And now it's just a reload war. Unfortunately, I'm in my regular AP. I can't quite get up to his top there, so I'm just going for a look down onto his armor, or maybe get into the crease between his turret and his hole right there. So whether I got a little bit lucky on the plus for the pin or I actually got into the turret ring, I'm not sure. I end up surviving that. So that nice tall turret, that's one thing that you can leverage to a small extent, is it'll be looked down quite a few times when you're face hugging like that, since your gun is much higher than most other people's. That will take a little bit of their advantage away for sloped armor that you're face hugging into right there. So we've knocked a couple down, working around the edges of this city right here, just looking for an opportunity to come around. Thought about that, but the ST1, I was not sure if he had any friends right there. I got a T10 moving in, so I'm going to turn around. You can notice how slow it is. Standard tier 8 heavy tank. It's just very difficult to turn around and get to other places. Good news is I didn't have to go very far, and the little delay cost me probably popping this ST1 on the side. He did spot me. You have to be careful in this spot right here. It is nice for looking where I was looking, but you can also get hit from the right side if they're up on their little hill. About B0, B9 or so. Sometimes they'll have alleys to shoot you right there, and I see that someone's coming through, so we'll put a shot into the ST1 and back up. Really not sure what he was thinking there. He had to know I was there, so why he came out into the open, I don't know. KB5's on the other side there. I'm just looking to see if I can't get the ST1, but it looks like a crit, no damage. Or a bounce, one of the two. I'm a bit worried the ML's going to come around and clip me out, so I really don't want him to do that. So I'm going to push around this way. The T10 is still alive. I'm hoping maybe I can get some shots. There goes the ST1. He went by. I got seen. Maybe the T32 will get in the way. No, he's not going to come out, so I'm just going to wait here. There's a scout pushing up on the 0 line, and the ST1 unwisely moves that way, and I'm able to take him down. WZ's moving up, and now it's about time we can start infiltrating through. The T10's moving up. I can move up. We can start working on these guys on the back edge here. I'm going to cut left. Oh, there goes that TD that was right there, so I'll put a shot into him as he runs. And unfortunately, oh geez, I'm going to get hammered by the 34-3. Looks like he got me in the turret and missed by the T-30, so that was lucky. Whether he was shooting me or someone behind, I don't know, but I'll take it. Down goes the 34-3, and the T-30's probably getting close to reloading at this point. Got to watch my right side. I was sort of expecting that WZ to come over here, but I misassessed that he's not actually on the level with me. He's down below a little ways. Bulldog's still trolling around behind us. A couple TDs back there. So I'm going to push around here. I see the AT. I'm thinking he's probably paying attention to something else right now, so throw the shot into his side. And unwisely I come back out, so I got his attention and I come out, and I should have expected that, and I can't get through his heavy armor right there. And I'm basically a one-shot here. Trying to turn back around. Holy cow. Very lucky I get a crit no damage from the Bulldog. He should have killed me right there. Looks like he's moving. Now I'm just feeling a bit cornered. We're maybe a bit overextended right here. Quite a few different angles that people can get shots on us. So I'm going to take a little bit of a chance and look out here. Oh, there he goes. Take a shot and just a snap. So another good example of the decent accuracy on this gun. It can be used for such things. And I move in here. I'm thinking I'm going to go get this WZ who's pushing in, but unfortunately the Scorpion that has camped the entire game is going to show up. I just take my shot on him and he slams the brakes on. I'm just wiggling. I'm trying to see if I can't get him to bounce, but the armor isn't going to hold up to a well-aimed Scorpion G shot. And I do not get away. So 3,918. This ends up being a win for us eventually. 470 blocked and 583. So you can see once they get in close and they're able to aim a little bit better, plus the side shots and whatnot, then the armor profile on the tank's not going to be as good. Plus I was facing, unlike the game before, this was a, what, a 510, so there were tier 9s involved here. You can see that the tier 9 guns didn't have a whole lot of trouble getting through, although I believe I did bounce one off of that tier 9 French tank that come in there. Giving them a little wiggle and giving them a little shake. So that is the second example with city brawling. Let's move on to the third. For our third and final example in a mountain pass, I'm in another 510, so bottom tier, but only 2 tiers to deal with. Tier 9s and tier 8s spawned in the northwest and headed down here to the southwest corner. Did not get spotted crossing the open area, but I'm going to come in here looking to cross and get into this kind of middle part, and unfortunately there is a IS-6 and I give a lot of side armor right there. So decent speed, but obviously not faster than an IS-6 to get to that spot, so he's able to actually get there and punish me a little bit. Come up here looking for a shot. There is an artillery I have to deal with, so this spot is fairly exposed to artillery, but the ST-1 has come across, and I don't really want him to be able to use this corner right here, so I'm going to come in and try to dissuade him from moving up, able to put a shot. We got a charioteer there. There's a KV-4, a E-75, and a T-34B behind me, and one little IS-6 and an ST-1, but what you're going to find is, as me and this charioteer are attempting to take down this ST-1, does a nice job of getting just enough angle there. This E-75 is just going to be more or less useless. I guess he's worried about the 25 TAP shredding him or something. Try to go onto the top of the turret. That does not work. And between me and the charioteer, just trying to find a way to get in on this guy. Right into the mantle. It's not going to work. He hammers him. ST-1 takes a shot, but it bounces. I'm trying to get into that flat plate right there, but unfortunately I get my tracks up on the edge there just a little bit, and it brings my gun up, but we're eventually able to take this guy down. Finally, the E-75 is moving in on the IS-6, and these guys are kind of hammering him as they go. You can see that we've got a Type down there and a T-32 down in the hole. Come around this corner, I'll put a shot on him. Still hitting the IS-6. T-25 is diving off. And now I'm going to come up here We'll start taking on these guys down the hole. There is an AC-48 right there as well, but my buddy should have him handled. Rear shot on the T-32. Decent accuracy once again. So really this thing is unlike the 5100, which is the only other French heavies we would have known, and the FCM for that matter. This thing is more obviously of a frontline brawler. It can get up there and use its armor to decent effect. And while I wouldn't say that it's as impressive an armor profile as I would have expected for all of the talking about its armor, I guess, that Wargaming did, that it's the armored version of the French heavy, it actually is okay in that role. We'll move on up here. The tall turret and the decent depression gives it some options as far as the terrain goes in World of Tanks, as was showed on the example back there in the other two games. So now we're coming up here. I got hit by the artillery once again. 25 TAPs in the back, but I think the Tortoise is going to handle him. The artillery is actually up on the hill right there, so I'll pop a shot. He dies to the double tap. And there's a T-30 here somewhere on this corner. There's also the mutant in here somewhere as well. He's behind the rocks. Gotta watch him popping out. T-30 will be able to actually kill me. He ends up killing the E-75, but I bounce him. This will happen if you aim at highly angled frontal armor like that. Mutant comes out, I'm able to just put that snap on him, and there's a bounce right there. Now the Mutant is firing regular AP, and it's not known for having great penetration. But against enemies in its tier, the armor does hold up pretty decently. I'll spit it out here in a minute. T-30 backing up, going hold down. I've got a super right in front of me. I've got a bunch of friends coming around from the east side over there. And the Mutant's starting to get a little nervous. He knows he's probably going to get pushed here pretty soon. I foolishly go for the top of the hole right there, and I think he just plain old missed on that. I'm not really sure what happened there. Whether it bounced off something and hit the ground, or he just plain old missed. And he pushes me knowing he's got to do something. I'm able to take him in the side right there. I'd have survived a pin anyway had he actually hit me or pinned me on that one. So we're looking for the T-30. Here he comes. I'm able to take that shot. And earlier you saw me take that snapshot as I was moving and was able to put a shot into the T-30. So as I've said several times, the accuracy is not bad. I really don't want to come around there. I'm a one-shot to him with the 750 Alpha gun. Just take a look here so we can find him. There he is. I'm able to drop one on him. And basically being a little timid right here, I should have been pushing in with the T-26E5 to get the T-30. We end up actually capping this thing out right here, but 3,488, 710 blocked, 485 assisted or spotted in some manner. So as you can see, not bad on this game either, showing some of the strengths. Like I said, it is a frontline kind of fighting tank as opposed to the 5100 idea, the autoloader where you're hanging back, trying to be more of a second echelon or cleanup guy. This is the kind of tank that wants to get up front. Alright, that is it for the review. We looked at 3 battles, we talked about a general overview, we looked at the tech tree, how I had mine set up, and a comparison amongst its peers. What would I say overall with this tank? It's interesting because it's got a lot of bad press, and I would definitely say it is not as bad as people are making it out to be, would be the best thing I could say for it. Is it at the top of the echelon of the tier 8s? No, I would say it's slightly below average. Where it really falls down, I think, is that it doesn't really fulfill the role of the armored French tank. It's sort of a tweener, moving from the tier 7 up to the tier 9. The tier 9 actually has some pretty good armor. Some of that problem with the armor is the fact that you see so many tier 9s and 10s that the armor wouldn't matter. Even the most armored tier 8s are typically getting shredded by 9s and 10s anyway, so there is a little bit of that involved right there. But you know, if it had another 20 millimeter on the front of the sloped armor, that would actually be pretty good, and I think make it a better tank. But now you're talking about power creep. You improve that, do you improve something else? So yes, it's not the #1 tank on the list as far as tier 8 heavies, but it certainly isn't that bad. And it leads to another pretty good tank at tier 9, which is a decently fun tank to play. So I would say if you're interested in another tier 10 and you want an armored French heavy tank, obviously this is the only choice, but it is not that bad. Give it a try. That is it for me. Signing off. Appreciate you signing in and listening to the review. See ya.